Good morning and welcome to the new episode of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. Canada is convulsed. Although Ambassador Bridge has been cleared, Ottawa is still under siege, and the whole Canadian nation is wondering why all this chaos. The world across the globe is thinking that this country, which prides itself on being peaceful, freedom loving, why is it the Prime Minister was so scared and the security people were so jittery that he had to leave his residence and find a sanctuary? How come that the country which has not witnessed any protests of such a magnitude is suddenly faced with such a commotion? Is it a civil rights movement? And they call it a freedom movement. Is it a truckers' revolution? Is it replica of what happened in India recently, the farmers' protest? Or is it a trailer of the shape of things to come? A trailer of Tenement Square or the Peace March? What is it? Have a look at what happened in the country. It has disrupted international commerce, and it has prompted Washington to pressurize Ottawa to end the border siege, which is basically an internal affair of Canada. For 5 days, the blockade of pickups, cars, and handful of commercial trucks chocked off the traffic at the Ambassador Bridge. And that's the busiest border crossing between Canada and USA, the two largest trading partners. There are blockades at two other crossings as well. And for more than 2 weeks now, downtown streets in Canada's capital city have been under siege. Convoys of semi-trailers and other vehicles, tractors, trucks have blockaded the city. And the protesters rail against basically COVID-19 restrictions and the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. What was really the issue? Was it just a vaccination issue? And these ongoing protests have gripped Canada, as I said. The question arises, what's the genesis? How did the protest start? In reality, much of the anger is not against vaccination. It's not because of the restriction based on corona's spread. Much of the anger is tied to the anger against Justin Trudeau, a Liberal Party politician who has been the Prime Minister since 2015 and is an object of hatred by many conservatives, particularly in the Western Canada. The conservatives have not liked his policies, and his love for the refugees, his love for the certain minorities, the Sikh fundamentalists, the Muslim refugees, does enrage people. His wanton criticism of the farmers' protest in India is also recoiling. If you remember in 2019, well before the current protests, demonstrators drove a convoy of hundreds of trucks from Western Canada to Ottawa, and that was symbolizing opposition to Trudeau's new tax, carbon tax, an environmental measure as claimed by him, but reality, something that was going to hurt, and hurt badly the oil industry, on which Alberta, for example, survived till recently. And if you remember, now look at it. Most of the people who were protesting at that time in 2019 were wearing yellow vests. And that is a symbol of solidarity with the French protest movement. And it happened the same year against the perceived economic injustice. So is it an international conservative blowback against the so-called liberal? Really, the liberal word should be changed. It should be called ultra-left and ultra-right. If conservatives are right, why not the left? Liberals be characterized by leftists. So this nomenclature has to change because they are not really liberals. If they were really liberals, then these restrictions possibly would not have been there. And look at the name given, Freedom Convoy, as if Canada was a slave country. So this year's Freedom Convoy began in January, and the first vehicles were setting up from the western parts of country, and then the people, protesters from other provinces joined in. A feeling was created that this was being done by the truckers. No, it was not. Truckers just gained prominence, and a public face was created of truckers to show that these are the people who are opposing it. But in reality, it was something much more. It was a protest against the policies of the Liberal Party, and then the people's anger, pent-up emotions against the COVID restrictions came in handy to be exploited. Now, it was a very well organized event. They had more than $10 million accumulated in the crowdfunding. So the convoy organizers said they were moved to protest by federal government requirement. That was the ostentatious reason. That the truck drivers be fully vaccinated if they want to avoid a 14 days quarantine upon re-entry from the United States. So this was what has been there for the last 2 years. I was in India in 2020. I came back and I was quarantined for 14 days. But the protesters forgot that this was not within the hands of Trudeau government. I may have no love for Trudeau government, but the reality is that this action of the truckers being fully vaccinated, otherwise they'll be subject to quarantine, is a bilateral measure with the US government having imposed the same rule on January 22. So when the two countries are trading, the rules have got to be equal on both sides. So even if Canada had ended the restriction, it would have made no practical difference. Now this is something that is amazing, that the organizers did not take into consideration the basic fact that the plea they were rendering was specious, not acceptable. This shows lack of planning and lack of foresight. Anybody could have said, look here, what the nonsense you are talking about. This is not only Trudeau's doing, it is Biden-Trudeau doing. The demonstrators in Ottawa, Ontario, elsewhere are primarily demanding an end to all COVID-19 vaccine mandates and other restrictions, including mask requirements. And then, amazingly, all these restrictions were not put in by the federal government. They have been put in by the various provincial governments. Some provinces are now removing those restrictions. So, to protest against the federal government alone, it doesn't look to me to be very sagacious advice. And then the icing on the cake. The demand was that the Trudeau should resign. Now, who are the people involved in it? That is a crucial question. The people who organized, who were the brain, who provided the muscle, was a group called Canadian Unity. And this freedom convoy was announced in early January. Announcement was made by this umbrella group, Canadian Unity, and the founder of that group is James Border. Now, James Border has very, very sketchy credentials. He's a supporter of QAnon, and QAnon is ultra-right, ultra-right, and a promoter of the conspiracy theories. But he is not the only person. Also involved are Tamara Lich. And this Tamara was previously belonged to the far-right party, a very, very wayward, capricious party, which calls for Western Canada to become independent, calls for partition of Canada, so that the Western Canadian provinces are separate country altogether. And Tamara is also a founder member of Trudeau's Royal Canadian Mounted Police Security Detail. So, before becoming a politician, Tamara was a police officer and involved in the security detail. Now, look at the reality, the physical aspect. Very few, very limited number of commercial trucks were part of the blockade at the Ambassador Bridge. And Ontario Premier Doug Ford said Friday that the last count he was there were only 5 of them. And the rest are all personal cars. So 95% of the truckers are working their back off. This is a political statement and what this is about. Now, when the Conservative Premier of the largest province of Canada says, well, this is a political statement, then you have got to think, was this freedom convoy an anti-Trudeau mayor and an effort to bring in an absolutely reactionary government that can have very negative effects on the whole Canadian cultural, political and social milieu? Because if those people come in power, the ultra-right group, then the immigrants and the visible minorities are going to suffer and suffer badly. And if you look at it, no sane politician is involved in their organization. They might be giving them some support because of the political reasons, but really they are not promoting it. And that's why the statement of Doug Ford is extremely, extremely important. What appears to me is that some very far-right, ultra-right figures appear to be trying to capitalize on the protest and pandemic fatigue to try to revitalize the movement, which represents a very small minority of the Canadians. So what has been the response? Trudeau has stood firm against lifting vaccine mandates. He called the protesters the fringe, who believe in the conspiracy theories and wear tin-foil hats. Now, this sort of a language, wearing tin-foil hats, would naturally add fuel to the fire. And we are aware that the Prime Minister lacks the political finesse. His mentors, his handlers, are not sensitive to the feelings of the people. His wanton interference in Indian protests was not liked by the people. His comments often enrage people, and so it does. The protests have also been condemned now, imagine, by various trucking groups. For example, Canadian Trucking Alliance, which has the vast majority of drivers fully vaccinated, say there's no problem because 90% of them are fully vaccinated. So again it shows that the basic planning was wrong. And then pandemic restrictions have been far stricter in Canada than in USA. That nobody can deny. But don't forget, Canadians by and large supported these restrictions. And reasonably. The Canadian hospital capacity is far less than that of USA. So the provinces were quick to impose lockdowns when infections rise. And don't forget, that enabled Canada to protect and save lives. The COVID-19 deaths in Canada are 1/3 of USA, not in numbers but in the percentage. And now look at the international scenario in this context. In USA, the protests have been cheered and promoted by Fox personalities, and they have been condemned that the harsh policies of far left Justin Trudeau have destroyed Canada with insane COVID mandates. Texas Senator Ted Cruz, once a presidential candidate, called truckers heroes and patriots. And the Tesla billionaire Musk also supported them. So spanning the Detroit now, look at the economic aspect. The Ambassador Bridge is across the Detroit, spans the Detroit River, connects Detroit and Windsor, and is a suspension bridge. And 25% of the total trade between USA and Canada is conducted via Ambassador Bridge. Every day, $417 million worth of goods are crossing. $417 million. It's critical for the food sector in both the countries. It's critical for the auto industry. And with this being shut down, the economy would be spoiled, annihilated. So the judge ordered the protesters to end the blockade. Police warned, and they have been removed. And very sensibly, Ford declared a sense of emergency that would allow penalties of jail for 1 year and a fine of $80,000 for anyone who obstructs the movement of goods, people and services. Michigan Governor Whitmer also asked the Canadian authorities to resolve the stand-up quickly. He said it's unacceptable because it's hitting paychecks and production lines. So, any mandate which helps solve this problem should be mandated. Now, thousands of the protesters initially descended in Ottawa. Their numbers have declined, so Ambassador Bridge has been cleared by the police. But still more than 400 trucks are parked in front of the Parliament building, along with a makeshift kitchen. Exactly reminds me of the protesters in India who had built townships practically. Undeniably, the protests have been peaceful, but there have been offences to many Canadians. Some protesters parked and urinated on the National War Memorial. They urinated and destroyed the Confederate flags, and swastikas have also been seen. Now, this is what I was talking about. When the swastikas come up, that's a danger of neo-Nazi, ultra-right groups joining hands. Even the statue of Terry Fox, a national hero, was draped with an upside-down Canadian flag and read "Mandate Freedom." So many protesters are carrying signs and flags with obscene insults. Ottawa mayor declared a state of emergency. But these protests pose a threat to the safety of the people. The cities are being harassed. There's non-stop honking of horns. The mental health issues are likely to crop up. So, this ultra-right movement has a dangerous implication for the nation as a whole, and definitely for the Liberal Party. Both sides are to be blamed, undeniably. Both sides are equal to be blamed. One lacks the fineness and the sense to administer, and the other lacks the sense of political wisdom. I hope both realize their mistake in the interest of the country and the social order. And the sooner they do, the better it will be. Thank you.